The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
A patient has been diagnosed with Ebola for the first time in the United States, CNBC reported. The CDC, Center for Disease Control, held a press conference yesterday, and the wording of this headline is actually important because prior to Tuesday, there have been Ebola patients in the United States and have been treated here, but after being initially diagnosed elsewhere. So for those thinking there has never been Ebola in the U.S. period, that is of course not accurate. This is the first case that was diagnosed within the U.S. A second possible case in the last few minutes before we went to air, Lewis, has broken, indicating that there is a second possible case that is being monitored, and it is someone who was in contact with the diagnosed case. According to WFAA.com, the patient is being treated at Dallas Hospital. Texas Health Presbyterian Hospital of Dallas announced on Monday that one of its patients was being tested. The patient was being kept in isolation at the time. And later, officials saying, indeed, yes, we do have a confirmation of Ebola here. And Lewis, the fears are becoming exponentially more significant amongst Americans.
And I think this is one of those situations in which it's okay to be somewhat fearful. We already have another report of someone who might have the disease. And considering that it has something like a 20-day incubation period, who really knows?
Well,
imagine being on that flight. Imagine, imagine being a friend or family of this person. It's scary to think about. And of course, it's not too far away from where I am right now.
So let's break this down piece by piece, because as Lewis says, it is understandable to be fearful about this, but we need to separate the reality from the exaggerated reality that many people think of. Yes, Ebola has a 21-day incubation period, meaning that from infection until the first sign of symptoms, you could go 21 days during which you're infecting other people without even knowing that you yet have the disease. That is very scary. But remember, ladies and gentlemen, that you can only get Ebola by coming in direct contact with the blood or body fluids of a person who has Ebola or has died from Ebola, including but not limited to urine, saliva, feces, vomit, and semen. Objects contaminated with the virus, like syringes and medical equipment, can also transmit Ebola, and infected animals by contact with blood fluids or infected meat. So, yes, Ebola has this long incubation period. Yes, Ebola is thus far having a significantly high fatality rate once you are infected, but we are talking about direct contact with the fluids of individuals with Ebola, and this is not as scary in terms of, yes, there's the sneeze possibility, right? Saliva is on there, and I think that's the scariest one for most people. You're on a plane, someone has Ebola, they don't know it, they sneeze, and their saliva and mucus is in the air and you breathe it in, right? That is certainly the most concerning example. But when we think about these others, these are not the most common scenarios that anyone is involved in with others, regardless of whether we're saying with or without Ebola.
That is true. But I think it's still perfectly normal to freak out if you were around this guy. How could you not?
No question about it, yeah.
I think it will be contained, and I think everything will be fine. But it's unfortunate, and it's just you can't help but think about this in the worst ways.
And also a message from medical professionals: it's a virus that's easy to kill by washing your hands and easy to stop by using gloves and barrier precautions. So let's not get crazy. Let's all be smart. We'll follow the indications of the CDC. We'll follow the progress of this patient and the possible second one, and we'll continue to talk about this. It has been an absolutely horrible outbreak. More than 6,500 people infected, resulting in over 3,000 deaths to date. We've spent about $1 billion so far bombing ISIS, and the U.S. military operations that have been going on for, I guess we could say close to a month at this point, have cost taxpayers between $780 million and $930 million, meaning within a day or two, maybe by the time you hear this podcast, even later today, it will be right around $1 billion. The CSBA estimates that if the current pace of operations continues, the U.S. could be spending between $200 and $320 million per month. in a conservative estimate, assuming a moderate level of air operations and 2,000 deployed ground forces. If the number of deployed ground forces increases, if we start ramping up the frequency or intensity or number of strikes, then that is a number that is also going to increase significantly. And President Barack Obama continues to insist that there will not be U.S. combat troops, but as we know, we do have ground forces there. Lewis, $1 billion. What have we gained so far?
I'm not sure. It seems like nothing, but we don't really know how the battle is going on those fronts.
And in all fairness, we can't necessarily say that at this point we can say for sure how it's doing. We might need more time, right? We have to be open to that idea.
Of course, if we look historically at how effective bombings are, we could deduce that this might just be a harmful thing. But at the moment, I don't know. Maybe it's doing some good.
We have to ask the following questions, right? Has ISIS been weakened in any way by this $1 billion that we've spent so far? If not, how specifically has the $1 billion we've spent helped to create a situation to weaken ISIS really soon, right? Because if we have no measurable results from the $1 billion we've spent, we should at least be able to qualify, well, how have we improved the situation going forward such that we will be able to have measurable results with this $1 billion that we've spent? We know that ISIS recruiting is going quite well, bringing in people from countries where prior terroristic cells, terrorist groups have not been able to recruit from. That seems like a bad sign, Lewis.
Of course, recruitment and that type of thing is one of the many bad results of bombing like this.
Has the $1 billion that we've spent made ISIS more or less capable of striking U.S. soil? That's another question. I don't have an answer to it. If it's made ISIS less likely, I certainly have not heard it. And remember, from the start, we didn't think that ISIS necessarily had that ability or even the desire to strike the U.S. directly. So I'm open to hearing any explanation from those who are deciding that this is a policy we want to carry out. What have we gained from the $1 billion we've spent so far? And if we haven't gained anything tangible, why has it been a good investment? These are just basic questions.
They are basic questions, and I'd like to hear answers from our audience. The international community has agreed that these types of attacks are going to be effective and are a good thing, and other countries have joined us in them. And so I'm not ready yet to say that it has been completely ineffective.
We just have no reason yet to believe that it has been.
Correct.
Let's talk a little bit about China. We've been telling you about the huge protest, the pro-democracy protest in Hong Kong. And in the midst of this, there was this very bizarre story from a state-controlled newspaper in China, which was very deliberately avoiding coverage of the protest in Hong Kong. And at the same time, I don't even understand this. And we've vetted this story as much as we can. It's being widely reported in numerous reputable media outlets that China has given 10,000 pigeons a rectal exam in an effort to prevent acts of terror, Lewis. The People's Daily said on Twitter that 10,000 pigeons were inspected rectally in advance of the celebration of National Day, which is today. The pigeon-related post was one of the most outlandish examples of the paper's failure to acknowledge the countless protesters in downtown Hong Kong. Instead, Lewis, rectal exams for pigeons. Is this actual state-sponsored propaganda, or is this actually something that China has done? They've given 10,000 pigeons rectal exams?
It seems like a difficult and arduous task. I'm not sure if it's propaganda, because it does sound like something China would do. So I'm not really sure. This is so bizarre.
And I guess what we're supposed to interpret this as is there were fears that somebody could have implanted a bomb rectally in a pigeon, which then would be used on National Day to blow people up. And so they wanted to one by one check the insides of the pigeons. How would you even get so many pigeons to check, right? Like, how do you capture and individually check 10,000 pigeons?
That is why it seems so difficult and absurd to me. And also, how big of a bomb can you put in a pigeon's rectum? How much damage could it really do? Presumably that pigeon still has to move around and fly. Or maybe they were just checking dead pigeons. I don't really know.
Yeah, which that would not really make too much sense, would it?
Does any of this make any sense?
No, yeah. I mean, this is just one of the strangest stories that we've had come to us from China. And we've had many unusual stories on the bonus show, Louis, that stem from China. And this is definitely at the top of my list.
Yeah, this would have been on the bonus show had you not put it on the regular show. These must be addressed.
All right, we talked yesterday about the NFL, the National Football League, penalizing a Muslim football player for a celebration that involved a Muslim prayer on his knees in the end zone on Monday Night Football this week. And we talked about what appeared to be a double standard in that Christian player Tim Tebow was never penalized for his Christian celebrations that also involved getting down on the level of the playing field. And the NFL, according to the New York Times, has now admitted that they did indeed make a mistake with this. The NFL said Tuesday, per the New York Times, that Kansas City Chiefs safety Husain Abdullah was mistakenly penalized by a game official when he knelt to pray after scoring a touchdown on Monday night. He was given a 15-yard penalty for unsportsmanlike conduct in the Chiefs' victory over the New England Patriots, the worst loss in 9 years for the New England Patriots, I might add. An NFL spokesman said yesterday that Abdullah should not have been penalized. Quote, officiating mechanic is not to flag player who goes to ground for religious reasons. That was Michael Signora tweeting on, well, obviously he was tweeting on Twitter. That's typically where people tweet. Players routinely gesticulate and point to God or do different God-related things after scoring touchdowns. The Council on American Islamic Relations said that the NFL should clarify its policy to prevent the appearance of a double standard. So again, I'll present to you what the NFL rulebook says on this, okay? Prolonged or excessive celebrations or demonstrations by an individual player are violations. Players are also prohibited from engaging in any celebrations while on the ground. Of course, the term celebration is not defined. Of course, the term on the ground is not defined. Does that mean laying prone or prostrate on the ground? Or does that mean on one knee, on two knees? What exactly does it mean to be on the ground? In any case, as we mentioned, the penalty did not have an effect on the game. The Patriots were getting embarrassingly blown out. Are we just to believe, Louis, the refs don't know the rule? And if so, if the refs don't know the rule, their job is to know the rules. That's their main job, know and enforce the rules of the game. This is not painting the NFL refs in a very good picture.
It isn't. I guess since things are not very clearly defined in the rule book that these celebrations are open to interpretation by individual refs, and sometimes they make a bad call. There are a lot of bad calls made in the NFL.
Well, that's the thing.
Refs.
A lot of people have been emailing me saying the NFL refs are particularly bad, that NHL reffing is pretty good. Major League Baseball has the subjectivity of balls and strikes, the strike zone, which is somewhat subjective, but that generally it's pretty good. And that the NBA and the NFL and, of course, soccer, and that's much a result of having one referee, one main referee who has to see everything for the most part, other than offsides and fouls near the sidelines, that NFL reffing is just really bad in general.
Sometimes. I mean, I guess overall, I wouldn't call it really bad. Some years are better than others. This year, I think, has been decent. But there's, the rules are far more clearly defined for actual play mechanics as opposed to these touchdown and end zone celebrations.
All right, send us your thoughts. What needs to happen, right? The NFL said it was a mistake, and do we need more? What do we need to happen next? Join us on Reddit. Talk to us on our Reddit subforum. Go to davidpakman.com/Reddit. That's REDDIT. Back after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to The David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show membership program is made possible in part by liberalbias.com. Liberalbias.com is your best source for unbiased news because spending $1 trillion on wars is freedom and liberty, but we just don't have the money for liberal Big Bird. If that sounds unbiased to you, go to liberalbias.com. Today's new member of the day is Jeff Robertson. Jeff, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. We are heading into the election season. We are doing our best to continue growing and expanding the show. And we really need membership support in order to be able to do that. So please join Jeff Robertson as a member of the show. Go to davidpakman.com/membership. Very easy to sign up and you will not regret it. Lots of great perks. It's Wednesday, meaning it is time for Hatriot Mail.
Between waving a Gadsden's flag from a highway overpass to drafting George Zimmerman for a 2016 run, a patriot has little time for anything else. But when that annoying little dweeb, David Pakman, really pushes the liberal envelope beyond what a God-fearing teabagger can bear, there's Hatriot Mail. Your brief respite from the unending deluge of liberal bias.
So the only thing I have to say about today's Hatriot Mail episode before playing it for you is Pollyanna. Polly, P-O-L-L-Y, Anna, A-N-N-A. That's all I will say, and then we will listen to this week's Hatriot Mail.
You are a Pollyanna ass-tard. Just because Obama appears to support your right to have intercourse with other men, this does not make him an adequate leader. Just as the fact that you are on TV does not make you a real journalist. You sickening excuse for an American.
Yeah, okay. So this, I guess, taking on a couple of themes, Lewis. Because I was born in Argentina, I'm not really an American, and that I'm gay. So those seem to be two common themes in Hatriot Mail. Yeah, I don't know. What can we can't really respond to this in a serious manner.
We can't. And what was it, an ass-tard? Was that what you were called?
Yeah.
This? Well, I'm not going to argue with that one. That one may be accurate, but I think the rest is pretty much nonsense.
So there it is. That's Hatriot Mail. And we have actually recently the Hatriot Mail has really been escalating. I don't know why. Maybe because we're getting closer to an election. So we have some really good Hatriot Mails that are going to be played for you in the coming weeks. This is a very unusual and disturbing story. On September 4th, a police officer pulled over LeVar Jones, who happens to be African American, and he asked Jones, who was standing beside his vehicle, for his driver's license. And Jones turned and reached into his car to retrieve the driver's license. And that's when the police officer panicked and started firing. All three of his shots were egregious, and we actually have audio, we have video of this, which we can actually take a look at from the dash cam.
Can I see your license, please? Get out of the car! Get out of the car! Get on the ground! Get on the ground!
I just got my license. You said get my license. I got my license right there. That's my license right there.
Put your hands behind your back. 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 Put your hands behind your back.
What did I do, sir?
Are you hit?
I think so. I can't feel my leg. I don't know what happened. I just grabbed my leg.
Brakes on 866. I need a 1050 too.
Why did you shoot me?
In the era before we had affordable video technology like this would have been a story about a police officer who reported that he shot someone during a traffic stop when the man dove into his car to grab a weapon, right? Absent any images, absent any video, people would probably have given the police officer the benefit of the doubt, even if it turned out that the driver was unarmed, on the theory that, listen, cops have a right to shoot people who appear to be not complying with their orders. But at the same time, because of the video, we know that the individual was actually complying with the order from the police officer. He asked for the ID and the individual and his registration, and the individual went to where those items are kept, if not the ID, certainly the registration, into the car, and this happened.
This reminds me of the story we covered where an officer did the exact same thing. It was an elderly man who was pulling a cane out of his truck. The officer thought it was a shotgun and then shot the elderly man. I mean, clearly we have a situation here where police officers are just afraid of being shot at all the time and are therefore shooting irrationally before seeing a real weapon.
And in this particular case, South Carolina Highway Patrol Officer Sean Grubert has been charged with armed aggravated assault against this African-American man who he shot at. And he has been either temporarily or may even have been fired at this point. And what can we say? What can we even come up with to excuse the behavior of the police officer? Could we say, oh, well, the man who had been stopped should have said before even moving, officer, those items are in my vehicle. Do I have your permission to turn and retrieve them? Like, would that be a reasonable expectation to have?
After seeing videos like this, I think that's what everyone should do. Not make any quick movements, not do anything funny with your hands, explain everything very clearly to these police officers because they're afraid and because they will start shooting for no reason. You
agree, Lewis, with the charges against the officer here?
I agree that this man should never carry a gun, ever again. If he can remain a police officer and not have any weapon of any sort, maybe keep him at a desk job in the office, I guess. But this man should never be patrolling the streets.
Pat Robertson on his 700 Club program was bragging about how good he is at faith healing. One viewer wrote in and said that Pat Robertson's words, his prayer, his faith healing prayer, actually healed her back. Check this out and listen very, very carefully to the vocabulary that's used here.
You got a couple of answers.
Hi, Pat. This is Mary of Cumberland, Maryland. She suffered with pain in her back for the past 2 years, has been praying for her back to be healed. She was watching this program, heard you give a word of knowledge saying, quote, someone is having trouble with their back and they're being healed right now. Mary claimed that for herself and felt her healing happening, then took off running through the house, praising the Lord. Man. And here's Vicky. She lives in Morgan City, Louisiana. She was diagnosed with a bacterial infection that caused night sweats. She was watching this program and heard you give a word of knowledge about someone with night sweats being healed and that the virus was being cleansed from their body. She claimed that for herself, was completely healed, called our prayer center to let us know that when she returned to her doctor, he was amazed that she had been healed.
Well, we don't mean to bankrupt doctors, but we're going to take some business away from them.
Amen.
As the Lord does what he does.
So he healed someone's back. He healed someone's bacterial infection. But this is the funniest part. This woman had a bacterial infection that was causing her night sweats, and Pat Robertson resolved it with his healing word, which cleansed the virus from her body. The virus. She had a bacterial infection, and Pat Robertson's prayer removed the virus from her body. Is it safe to say, Lewis, that if these emails aren't straight up parodies, the people that are writing in may not have the best grasp on what it is that is actually going on in their bodies?
I don't think anyone on this show has any grasp of reality. And here we have Pat Robertson telling people that, in not so many words, that they don't need to see doctors.
Right. Well, that's the question. First of all, why did God make these people sick in the first place? Oh, we can't know that. God works in mysterious ways. Well, why has God chosen Pat Robertson, given Pat Robertson the ability, the power of healing individuals through God? No, we can't know that. God works in mysterious ways. Well, how does Pat Robertson know for sure that it was actually his prayer through God that healed these people? Nothing mysterious there, Lewis. Pat Robertson knows for sure. And if this were true, it would be straight up immoral for Pat Robertson to be doing anything other than going from hospital to hospital healing people. If he truly had this ability, it would be immoral for him to be sitting there doing this show.
It wouldn't be nearly as profitable, though, would it?
No, probably not.
Yeah, so Pat Robertson, more nonsense as usual. I guess he can only heal people who ask for help through his program, and perhaps only people who are donors.
Yeah, it's quite a restricted list that can benefit from Pat Robertson's faith healing. It's just absolute insanity. Does Pat Robertson really believe that he can faith heal, or is this just part of his shtick? Let me know. Follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/dpackman. Mark Naison joins me next.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by Mark Naison, who is a professor of African American Studies and History at Fordham University, also co-founder of the Badass Teachers Association, the largest education activist group in the nation. The topic today is corporate influence on education. And Professor Naison, you know, I think if you were to say to many people, what is the effect of corporations on education? They might come up with something like, oh, is it the kind of corporatization of college? Or is it Doritos and Coca-Cola in vending machines in schools? But we're really talking about something far more sinister, aren't we?
Absolutely. The corporate influence is shaping what every child will learn from pre-K through college. And it's being done largely through influencing government bodies to impose curricula that teachers think are burdensome and inappropriate and sometimes abusive. And the best example of this is the Common Core standards, which are now being presented as if they were a bottom-up initiative by teachers, educated, and elected officials organized through the states, when in fact, $200 million of Bill Gates' money was given to governors' bodies, to PTAs, to teachers' unions, and foundations to try to push this initiative. And when we in New York State experienced for the first time tests aligned to Common Core, teachers, parents, and educators were just shocked that this had been imposed on them without any discussion and also without any ability to modify them.
Talk a little bit, if you can, about the impetus for, in other words, why do big corporations want to get involved in education? What is the ultimate goal?
Well, one of them is this is a huge market. It's, you know, $788 billion market of government expenditure in education that test companies, technology and software companies all see as a tremendous market if you can standardize teaching enough so you can develop nationwide products for the market. So test companies stand to make huge profits if there is a national curriculum that is uniform across the country. So that's one motive is, and then people who are trying to develop a procedure to have the entire process digitized stand to make a lot of money from the software. But there's another motivation, and that is that a lot of businesses feel their labor force is not being properly trained by the public schools and want to make sure that there's kind of a uniform level of training so that if somebody graduates from high school, you know, they can be employees who can plug right into their companies.
Do you see a connection, or do you see as two unrelated issues, what you and I have just been talking about for the last few minutes, and the issue of both the rewriting of textbooks with a kind of religious impetus or through a religious lens that we're seeing catalyzed quite a bit in Texas, as well as the fight to teach so-called controversies around, for example, evolution? Do you see those? Are these completely unrelated issues?
These are completely different initiatives. What's very interesting is that the people behind Common Core are very much opposed to those grassroots conservative initiatives. That's what makes this so complicated. Initially, the opposition to the sort of top-down curricular modification was coming a lot from conservatives. And it took a while for liberals and progressives to realize, wait a minute, when big money shapes education policy, that's a subversion of democracy. So there are many issues in education, and one of them is the attempt to try to undermine teaching that is going on in science and history to present a more religious perspective. But then there is an attempt to reshape education policy from the top down in a way that really excludes teachers and parents. So we have a lot on our plate.
And talk to us a little bit about, once we see, or what do we know, I guess, is the best way to ask, about what the effects are on students who go through the education systems that are so influenced by corporation. What then is the effect when they later in life enter the workforce, for example?
Well, this is a very interesting question. I'm a labor historian, and I've done a lot of research in the 1930s when the largest corporation in the country was General Motors. Now the largest corporation in the country is Walmart, which starts off its associates at $7.50 an hour, even though its CEO makes $16,000 an hour. If you are looking at the kind of jobs we're creating, where 7 out of 10 jobs are going to be entry-level, moderate to low-wage jobs, it seems to me that what we're doing with a lot of these corporate policies, we're not encouraging critical thinking. We're encouraging rote learning. We're encouraging, obedience. You're taking out literature, for example, and putting in sort of, very narrow textual analysis. You're removing a lot of studies of history. You're removing hands-on science that is experimental for things which can be done on a computer.
It's amazing, as you're saying this, and I don't know if this is my kind of cynical mind going to a dark place, what you're saying in a way, and connecting it to Walmart as the biggest employer, is reminding me of when I read the great book Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, where there was a deliberate effort based on the knowledge that if everybody is very intellectually curious and fully equipped with critical thinking and other resources, there are many jobs that they simply would not do, they would not tolerate. Thus, there were people that were educated or raised in a particular way to tolerate those jobs.
David, you are right on target. I actually have a former student who's now a professor at LSU. Her next book is going to be on the Walmartization of education. What we have is an enforced standardization from the top down to reduce education to the lowest common denominator and take the creativity out of the classroom. And we're starting kids from pre-K. We're removing play. We're removing recess. All kids do is study for tests. And the tests are expensive. So what gets pushed out when budgets are strapped? Arts, music, science, school trips. It's almost like you're making kids adapt to a brave new world of low-paid work where they have little autonomy and authority.
In the last bit of time we have here, can you give our audience some ideas as to how they can work to counteract what we're seeing?
Okay, the best thing you can do is, if you think testing in your schools are excessive, have your kids refuse to take the tests. There is a growing movement of test refusal or opting out around the country.
And you're talking about the standardized tests, right? Not just tests within class.
Tests.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm also saying, if your kids have recess canceled to study for tests, tell the school that's unacceptable. Tell the schools that there are too many tests. For example, in New York State, our third graders take 6 days of tests, 90 minutes a day. They take more tests than you take to get into law school or medical school. I think, I go back to, the 60s. And to me, the most horrible bipartisan initiative in my lifetime before this was the Vietnam War. And the part of the way we stopped it was to resist what we thought was an unjust war. Now, the most destructive bipartisan initiative is test-based education policy. And I think we have to resist the tests. Teachers, parents, students, I'll give you a number. Before No Child Left Behind, the average public school gave 6 tests a year. Now they give 17. This is way out of hand. And the only people can stop it are parents, teachers, and older students by basically saying, we won't take the test unless you cut back. And if you're going to spend money in our schools, spend money on things that make kids love school, which is art. And also stop scripting teachers and constantly judging them on the basis of test scores and coming in and observing them on rubrics where you check off little things. Trust your teachers to teach.
All right. We've been speaking with Professor Mark Naison, Professor of African American Studies and History at Fordham University. Really a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. It's a very important subject. And I think people don't realize what's going on until they talk to parents about what's going on with their kids in school.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We're still debriefing all of the insane audio and video from that Values Voters Summit, and I have one more piece of evidence I want to play for you to show you how outrageous this Values Voters Summit is. This is Jerry Johnson, president of the National Religious Broadcasters. He closed out what they called the Marriage in America panel at the Values Voters Summit by declaring that if young people are supporting gay marriage because they want to be on the right side of history, as he put it, then anti-gay marriage activists need to explain to them that they actually have it backwards. And he went on to say that President Obama is essentially snubbing straight people by using the term LGBT. Check this out.
What role do you think the media has played in this campaign to redefine marriage?
Well, it's huge, and I think we should go back to 2008, probably when the president was elected the first time. In his speech, you should remember, in the inauguration speech, he listed rich, poor, white, black, and then he inserted gay and straight in there. And that was huge, and the media picked up on that. Somewhere along in his presidency, he switched from gay and straight to LGBT. It's a very interesting switch. I don't know if anyone's marked that switch. He never says gay and straight anymore. Now it's LGBT. Straight's not even in that mix. That's an interesting point.
I like how they say that that's a very interesting point. There's actually very little interesting about it. Using the term LGBT is a snub to straight people in the same way that not calling black people the N-word is some kind of a snub to white people. These are essentially equivalently ridiculous claims.
But we've heard similar things before, right? About how Barack Obama hates white people, Barack Obama hates straight people. Yeah, of course it's all nonsense. It's interesting to hear, though.
I like how he also says that history is actually on the anti-gay side. I guess he means that the long history of gay bashing is mostly coming from those who are anti-gay. That's the only thing he could possibly mean.
Or he thinks that once LGBT equality is ubiquitous, that, I don't know, we'll fall into chaos, the country will be destroyed, and those few people who were against it will say, see, we told you.
He also said that Christians shouldn't live under a self-imposed Sharia law on this issue, where they also are acquiescing and using the terms that the pro-gay left wants to use. The Sharia law-like declarations and regulations are the ones that his side wants. It's just that they're under the umbrella of Christianity rather than Islam. He'll never understand that.
No, I don't think he will. Maybe we should try to get this guy on the show.
Solar power is growing so fast that the traditional energy companies are doing everything they can to stop it. Solar power provides only 0.4% of all electricity in the US, but utilities are very worried about its growth. And as solar power technology continues to become less expensive and more efficient, tens of thousands of Americans continue to get the photovoltaic panels up on their roofs. They're generating their own power. And not only are many households purchasing less and less electricity, there are these deals that are established in many states that allow those with solar power who generate more power than they use to sell back their excess power to the grid. And this really has mainstream traditional utility companies upset. So utilities are now very aggressively pushing against those, I forget the name of them. It's net metering laws, which allow the resale of excess electricity back to the grid. Utilities want to stop that. And it's amazing because when we look at the fact that it's only 0.4% of all the power that's provided by solar energy, you would say, well, why is this that big of a deal? But when you look at the fact that rooftop solar generation has tripled since 2010, you see that this could very quickly grow exponentially. The photovoltaic panels get cheaper, the installations get cheaper, you're able to sell excess energy back, the panels themselves are more efficient. This does not bode well for the traditional get our energy from coal utilities. And they are activating, Lewis, against those who want to continue to further solar energy, which is a really, really good thing, obviously.
They are going to try to halt progress in this country. And there are many places, yes, where you are able to sell your extra power back to the grid. But there are also places where you are being taxed extra for having solar panels and for producing your own energy. It's a battle right now.
Yeah, we've seen that in some countries where you actually have to pay a tax that will make up what is essentially not your savings. You're almost making them up by having to pay a tax. And we're seeing this with trains, pressure from the automobile and the airline industry to not have faster and faster trains in the U.S. I'm hopeful that, like with trains, that the solar power issue will eventually be won by those who are on the side of progress and technology rather than the side of maintaining influence to prevent progress and keep dirty energy the most prevalent. Our voicemail number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Call anytime. Here's a voicemail I got.
The dangers of Republicans taking over the Senate is not what they will block. The danger is what President Obama will sign. Because frankly, I do not trust them. You can guarantee the Trans-Pacific Partnership, Keystone XL Pipeline, Grand Bargain, cutting Social Security. He's a wolf in sheep's clothing. He's not a progressive.
So this is a concern. This is a legitimate concern about Republicans taking over both houses of both the House and Senate in the next month's midterm. What will President Obama do without the halting influence of a more progressive influence in either house? That is an absolute concern, and it is well put in the voicemail. Here's one more voicemail.
Hello. I'm calling because I guess it's my fault. I'm hard of hearing, and about 11 minutes before the end of the show, every night, tonight was no exception, loud music is playing, and you're speaking at the same time, and the music completely overwhelms what you're saying. And I miss out on, a big chunk of what you're saying. So please cut that music back when you start talking.
All right, we are going to look into that, Lewis. I don't want anyone having any trouble hearing what it is I'm trying to say. I thought that we only had a few seconds of overlap, but Lewis, we will look into it, and we will see exactly what it is that is going on that is causing some difficulty there. I will personally look into it, ma'am, I assure you. On today's bonus show, marketing a fake bar for pregnant women. A Christian broadcaster welcomes the Ebola case in Texas, and a car that runs on salt water. What is the bonus show? The bonus show is more programming that is established for our paid subscribers. You can get access to the bonus show and lots of other great member benefits simply by signing up for membership. It's very easy. It'll take you a minute or two. Go to davidpakman.com/membership. You don't have to be a freeloader, but you can if you want. The broadcast show will always continue to be free, but for those who want more and want to support us, there's membership. Talk to you on the bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.